My name is Marisol Delgado. I am 31 years old, and I spent most of my life believing that if I worked hard enough, quietly enough, and asked for little enough, my family would eventually see me. I was wrong. I found out how wrong on the Thursday before my wedding, when my mother sent me a text message at 11:47 at night. I was sitting at my kitchen table going through the final vendor confirmations, the florist, the catering timeline, the car service that would take my grandmother to the venue. The text came in while I was holding a highlighted copy of the ceremony program. It said, "Your brother's trip matters more than your little party. We're flying out with him in the morning. Sorry, sweetheart." That was the whole message. No question mark. No call before it. Just that. I set the program down on the table and I smoothed the corner where I had bent it. In the second bedroom, in the filing cabinet, there was a green accordion folder I had been adding to for 7 years. I did not think about it then. I finished confirming the vendors. I did not pick up my phone again for 11 minutes. I counted the seconds somewhere in the back of my mind the way you count during a power outage, waiting to find out whether the lights are coming back. They did not come back. My name is Marisol Delgado, and my wedding was not a little party. It was 214 guests, a venue I had researched for 8 months, a dress I had altered 3 times to get the neckline right, and a man named Crispin Vance who was, as of that Saturday, about to become my husband. Crispin was 47 years old, a documentary filmmaker with a quiet reputation and a wide network, and we had met at a fundraiser 18 months earlier, fallen into something steady and serious, and decided, without drama, to get married in the spring. We had known each other long enough. We were certain. What my mother meant by little party was that she had never taken it seriously. What she meant was that my wedding had always existed in a lower tier of the family's attention, somewhere below my younger brother Marco's semester abroad, below my father's quarterly reviews at the firm, below whatever conversation was happening at the center of the table that I was not part of. I had understood this for years. I had simply never seen it written down so plainly at 11:47 on a Thursday night. If you have ever been the quiet one in a loud family, you know what it feels like to sit in a room where everyone is talking and realize that the talking has nothing to do with you. Not in a cruel way, not always. Sometimes it is simply that the room has a gravity and you are not part of it. Take a moment and think about whether there is someone in your own family like that. Someone who arranged things, who confirmed things, who made sure the details were handled, and who did it without anyone asking and without anyone noticing when it was done. If you are thinking of someone right now, keep watching. This story is for you. I grew up in Tucson, the eldest of 3. My father, Ernesto Delgado, was a regional operations director for a mid-sized engineering consultancy, a serious man who dressed carefully and spoke in the measured, declarative sentences of someone who had learned early that authority sounds like certainty. My mother, Patricia, ran the household with a cheerful efficiency that left no room for complaint because there was never anything visibly wrong. On the surface, we were organized. We were fine. We had dinner together most nights and took a family trip every 2 years and sent Christmas cards with everyone's faces on them. What the cards did not show was the distribution of attention inside that house. Marco was the youngest and the only boy, and from the time he was about 9 years old it was clear that the family's emotional energy flowed toward him the way water finds the lowest point in a room. It was not that my parents were unkind to me or to my sister Renata. It was that Marco's needs arrived with a kind of urgency that ours never did. His school projects were discussed at dinner. His moods were tracked and accommodated. When he wanted something, a trip, an extension, a conversation, a second chance, the family rearranged itself around the request. When Renata or I wanted something, we made our case and waited and usually found a reason to let it go. I was not resentful about this for most of my childhood. I was practical. I understood the physics of the house and I worked within them. I was a good student because being a good student was something I could do on my own, without requiring the room's gravity to shift. I was organized because organizing things was a way of being useful without making a demand. I was quiet in the particular way that children learn to be quiet when they have figured out that noise costs more than it returns. I graduated from the University of Arizona with a degree in communications, moved to Phoenix, and built a career in event production. By the time I was 28, I was managing large-scale corporate events, conferences, product launches, annual galas, for a regional firm that handled clients across the Southwest. I was good at the work. Not in a modest, self-effacing way. I was genuinely, technically good at it. I understood logistics the way some people understand music, as a system with internal rules that reward attention and punish assumption. I knew how to read a vendor contract and find the clause that would matter 6 months later. I knew how to build a run of show that had 15 minutes of buffer built into every hour without anyone noticing the buffer was there. I knew that the difference between an event that felt effortless and an event that felt chaotic was almost entirely invisible to the people attending it, which meant the work itself was invisible, which was fine. Invisible work is still work. I had made my peace with that. What I had not yet made my peace with was that my family applied the same logic to me that an audience applies to a seamless event. Because nothing went wrong, they assumed nothing required effort. Because I did not ask for help, they assumed I did not need any. Because I was competent, they treated my competence as a feature of the background rather than a thing I had built. My father was the clearest version of this. Ernesto Delgado loved me in the way that certain fathers love their capable daughters, with a distant pride that never quite translated into attention. He was interested in Marco's ambitions and patient with Marco's failures in a way he had never been. Interested in mine. When I told him I had been promoted to senior producer at 27, he said good and changed the subject to Marco's internship application. When I told him Crispin and I were engaged, he said well, he seems like a decent man and asked if Marco had sent the forms in yet. I folded the printout I was holding into quarters and set it on the counter before I answered him. The first time I understood that my father's dismissal was not accidental. Not distraction, not oversight, but something with an actual shape. I was 26 years old, and we were at my cousin Vera's engagement dinner at a restaurant in Scottsdale. There were 14 of us at a long table in a private room, and the conversation had been going the way family conversations go, in currents and eddies, different pairs pulling toward different subjects. I had spent most of the meal talking with Vera's mother about the venue search, because I knew venues and I had opinions that were actually useful. At some point the table consolidated into a single conversation, the way large tables do, and my father was at the center of it, talking about a project at the firm. Someone asked about succession planning, not at the firm but jokingly about the family. Who was going to carry the Delgado name forward in some meaningful professional sense? It was the kind of question that gets asked over wine at family dinners and is not meant to land anywhere serious. My father looked down the table. He looked at Marco, who was 22 and between his sophomore and junior years and had not yet declared a major. He said, Marco's going to do something real. I can feel it. He did not look at me. I was sitting 4 seats to his left and I had, at that point, been employed full-time for 3 years and promoted once. I had, 6 months earlier, single-handedly managed the logistics for a 400-person corporate conference that had come in under budget and received a written commendation from the client. None of that was in the room as far as my father was concerned. Vera caught my eye from across the table. She pressed her lips together in the small, private way of someone who has witnessed something and wants you to know they saw it. I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip and said nothing. That was the first time I named what I was dealing with. Not neglect. Not busyness. A deliberate, organized distribution of significance, and I was on the wrong side of it. Over the next several years I cataloged the pattern without meaning to, the way you catalog the sounds a house makes at night. Not consciously but completely. I managed the logistics for my parents' 35th anniversary dinner. I found the venue, negotiated the private dining room, coordinated the guest list, handled the invitations, arranged the car service for my grandmother, and built a timeline that ran from 6 p.m. to 10:30 with no gaps. I did all of this over 3 weeks while managing 2 concurrent client projects. My mother thanked the restaurant manager at the end of the night. My father told Marco the food was excellent and asked what he thought of the wine. I drafted and submitted the insurance claim when my parents' house sustained roof damage after a hailstorm, because my father did not understand the documentation requirements and my mother had never dealt with a claim of that size. I spent 11 hours across 4 days on the phone with the adjuster, the contractor, and the insurance company's regional office. The settlement came in at $34,000 above the first offer. My father told his colleague at the firm that he had handled it himself. I researched and enrolled my mother in a specialist practice when she was having unexplained fatigue symptoms that her GP had not pursued adequately. I found the right internist, reviewed the referral process, confirmed the insurance coverage, and drove her to the first 2 appointments because she did not want to go alone. She told her sister she had done her own research online. I located and secured the apartment Marco lived in during his first year in Phoenix, because he had let the deadline pass on his first 2 applications and was 3 weeks from his start date with nowhere to live. I called 6 properties, negotiated a short-term lease on one of them, and co-signed the agreement because his credit history was too thin. Marco told his friends his sister helped him find a place. I sat with each of those facts the same way I had sat with my water glass at Vera's engagement dinner, quietly without putting them down. All of it lived in that green accordion folder, 41 documents by the time I counted them on Thursday night. Anniversary dinner contracts with my name on them. Insurance claim correspondence. Referral paperwork. A co-sign agreement, notarized. Every confirmation, every submission, every form I had filed or negotiated or arranged. I had started the folder at 24 without a specific intention, the way a careful person starts a file for receipts they may never need. By the time I was sitting at my kitchen table at midnight with a text message that called my wedding a little party, it had been sitting in that filing cabinet for 7 years. By the spring of my 31st year, the folder had 41 documents in it. I had not counted them until the Thursday night I received my mother's text. After I set down the ceremony program and waited out those 11 minutes, I walked to the filing cabinet in my second bedroom and I opened the drawer and I looked at the folder. I did not take anything out of it. I just looked at it for a moment, the way you look at something you put away a long time ago and forgot was still there. Then I went back to the kitchen and finished confirming the vendors. I want to be precise about the timeline of the 4 days that followed because the sequence matters. On Friday morning, I confirmed with my venue coordinator that the final headcount was 214. I sent the updated number to the caterer. I called my grandmother's car service and confirmed the pickup time. I did all of this alone at my kitchen table, while my parents were at the airport with Marco for his flight to Buenos Aires, where he was beginning a 10-week language immersion program that my father had partially funded and fully celebrated. I did not call my parents on Friday. I did not call them on Friday night. I had nothing to say to them that I trusted myself to say calmly, and I had learned over many years that there was no value in saying an uncalm thing to my father. He did not hear the content. He heard the register, and he used the register to dismiss the content, and then nothing had been said at all except that I had raised my voice, which became the story. On Saturday morning I got dressed in my apartment with my best friend Claudia, who had flown in from Denver and who did my hair and made coffee and did not ask me how I was feeling because she knew me well enough to know that asking would not help. We drove to the venue. I walked through the room once, alone, before the guests arrived and checked every table and confirmed every placement and verified the AV setup, because I was a person who checked things, and because it was my wedding, and because if I stopped moving I would feel the specific shape of the empty place where my parents should have been standing. The ceremony began at 4 o'clock. I walked down the aisle on the arm of my uncle Rodrigo, my mother's older brother, who had flown in from Albuquerque the moment he heard what had happened, and who held my arm with the steady pressure of someone who understood that this was not the time for words. Crispin was waiting at the end of the aisle. He looked at me the way he always looked at me, as though I was a complete and sufficient fact, and my throat tightened for exactly 3 seconds before I let it go and smiled. The ceremony was 22 minutes. The reception ran until 10. Claudia gave a toast that made half the room laugh and the other half reach for their napkins. Crispin's colleague, a journalist named Raymond Park, danced with my grandmother for 20 minutes and she talked about it for the rest of the evening. The food was excellent. The lighting was exactly what I had specified. At some point during the reception, I did not know this until Sunday morning, someone in the room filmed a 40-second clip of Crispin and me during the first dance. I do not know who posted it or why it traveled the way it did. The clip showed Crispin saying something to me quietly near the end of the song, and me laughing, genuinely, not for a camera, and the two of us moving in the easy, unhurried way of people who are simply glad to be where they are. Crispin was recognizable in the clip. He was not famous, but he was known in certain circles. Documentary circles, journalism circles, the peripheral orbit of cultural media in the Southwest. People who knew him would recognize him. People who worked adjacent to his world would recognize him. One of those people was a man named Gerald Fitch. Gerald Fitch was 63 years old, a senior partner at my father's engineering consultancy and Ernesto Delgado's direct superior. He had been in the documentary world briefly in his 30s, had funded a project, had connections, followed certain people. He saw the clip sometime on Saturday night or early Sunday morning, recognized Crispin's face, and watched it twice. On Sunday morning he mentioned it, casually, to my father. I did not know any of this on Sunday morning. I was in a hotel room in Scottsdale with my husband, reading the vendor settlement emails I had been copied on and finishing the coffee Crispin had brought from the lobby. My phone was face down on the nightstand. I was not looking at it. By Sunday afternoon it had 61 missed calls from my mother's number. I stared at the screen for a long moment. I picked up my pen from the nightstand, uncapped it, then capped it again and set it down flat before I did anything else. Then I turned the phone face down again and finished my coffee. I called her back at 4:17 p.m. She picked up before the first ring had finished. "Marisol," she said, and her voice had a specific quality I had not heard from her in a very long time, something tight and a little breathless, the sound of a woman trying to sound calm about something that had not been calm. "Your father needs to speak with you." I said, "All right." There was a pause. I heard the phone change hands. My father's voice came on the line and he said, "Gerald Fitch saw the clip." I said, "I know who Gerald Fitch is, Dad." He said, he recognized Crispin. "He called me this morning. He wants to know," and here he stopped, and I heard him choose his next words with the particular care of a man recalibrating. "He wants to know how well we know the Vance family." I squared the edge of the hotel notepad on the nightstand before I answered. "You flew to Buenos Aires for Marco's trip," I said. "You missed my wedding. Gerald Fitch saw the clip on his own. Is that what you're calling to tell me?" My father did not answer immediately. "Marisol," he said, "this is a significant professional connection. You understand that? Fitch is." "I know what Fitch is," I said. Another pause. Longer. "We'd like to come and see you," my father said. "Your mother and I. When we're back from Buenos Aires. We thought we could do a dinner. Something to celebrate properly." The word properly landed in the room like a weight dropped from a height. I looked at the notepad. I looked at the pen. I thought about the green accordion folder in the filing cabinet in my second bedroom. I thought about 41 documents. "Sure," I said. "I'll check my calendar and send you some dates." I kept my voice exactly level. I did not say anything else. I said goodbye and I ended the call and I set the phone down and I looked at the ceiling of the hotel room for a long time. Crispin came out of the bathroom and looked at me. He did not ask. He knew me well enough not to ask. "My father's boss saw the clip," I said. Crispin sat down on the edge of the bed. "And now your father wants a dinner." "He wants a dinner," I said. Crispin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you want to do?" I thought about the folder. I thought about the anniversary dinner, the insurance claim, the internist, the apartment cosign. I thought about your brother's trip matters more than your little party. I thought about Marco's name at the center of my father's attention for 31 years, and my name at the edge of it, reliably, every time. "I want to have the dinner," I said. Crispin looked at me. "I want to have the dinner," I said again, "and I want to bring the folder." The dinner was my idea, which meant I controlled the details. I chose a restaurant in North Phoenix, not my parents' neighborhood, not a place freighted with family history, not somewhere my father could feel at home by default. I chose a quiet Italian place with good lighting and tables far enough apart that a conversation could run at normal volume without carrying. I made the reservation for a Sunday at 7. I told my parents the name and the address and nothing else. Crispin offered to come. I told him I would handle this one alone. He looked at me for a moment and then he nodded, and that was the end of the discussion. I arrived 12 minutes early. I brought the green accordion folder in my work bag, the same bag I carried to every client meeting, a dark navy canvas tote with a structured base and 2 interior pockets. I set it under my chair when I sat down. I ordered water and did not look at the menu. I already knew what I wanted. My parents arrived together at 7:03. My mother came in first, wearing a silk blouse I recognized from a birthday dinner 3 years ago, and she was smiling the particular smile she deployed for events she had decided in advance would go well. My father was behind her, in a jacket and collared shirt, the way he dressed when he wanted a dinner to feel like an occasion without committing to a full formality. He shook my hand. My mother kissed my cheek. They sat down. For the first 20 minutes, the dinner was the dinner my parents had decided they were having. My mother asked about the honeymoon plans. My father mentioned Gerald Fitch twice, lightly, as though the name were something he was just happening to set on the table. He said Fitch had mentioned Crispin's work in a conversation at the firm. He said it with the careful casualness of a man who wanted me to understand the significance without appearing to announce it. I listened. I asked a few questions. I kept my hands in my lap or around my water glass. Then my father said, "We thought, now that things have settled, we could talk about hosting a proper reception. Something more formal so that the right people could be there." He paused. "Something that reflects the family appropriately." I looked at him. "The right people," I said. "Gerald and his wife. A few others from the firm. Some of your mother's contacts." He said it as though he were offering me something. "You put together a nice event, obviously. But this would be on a different scale." My mother nodded along the edge of his sentence. "We just think it would be nice to do it properly, sweetheart. With the family behind it this time." With the family behind it this time. I reached under my chair and I set the accordion folder on the table. Neither of them said anything. The folder was thick and its color was specific, that institutional green of old filing systems, and it sat between us on the white tablecloth like a third person arriving late. "I want to show you something," I said. I opened the folder. I did not make a production of it. I turned back the flap and I reached in and I took out the first set of documents, the tabbed section I had organized 2 days earlier, and I placed them on the table one at a time, face up, in order. The first was the contract for my parents' 35th anniversary dinner. My name was on it as the organizing contact. The date, the venue, the itemized menu selections, the car service order for my grandmother. All of it in my handwriting or my email signature. The second was the insurance claim documentation. The initial claim form, my correspondence with the adjuster across 11 hours of phone calls, the final settlement letter showing the adjusted figure. $34,000 above the first offer. My father's name was on the policy. My name was nowhere on the settlement letter because I had never asked for it to be. The third was the referral paperwork for my mother's internist, the insurance pre-authorization I had filed, the appointment confirmation, the follow-up scheduling notes I had kept in a shared document I built for her so she would not have to track it herself. The fourth was the co-sign agreement for Marco's apartment. My signature, notarized, dated 14 months ago. The lease term. The monthly amount. I placed each one and I left space between them and I did not speak while I did it. My mother's smile had gone somewhere. I was not sure when it left. My father was looking at the documents with the particular stillness of a man who has recognized a situation and has not yet decided how to respond to it. I placed a fifth document. A single printed page, a chronological list I had made in my own handwriting, dated, of every task I had handled for the family over 7 years, and I set it at the top of the arrangement, above the others, where it was easy to read. Then I folded my hands and I waited. My father looked up from the page. "Marisol," he said, "we know you help out." "I want to read you something," I said. "From memory." He stopped. I had not rehearsed this in the sense of standing in front of a mirror. I had simply lived with these sentences for long enough that they had settled somewhere permanent. "At Vera's engagement dinner," I said, "you looked down the table and said Marco's going to do something real. I can feel it. I was sitting 4 seats to your left. I had been promoted once and managed a 400-person conference that came in under budget with a written commendation from the client. That was the year I started keeping this folder." My father's jaw shifted slightly. He did not speak. When I told you I had been promoted to senior producer, you said good and asked if Marco had sent his internship forms in yet. I assumed you were distracted. I kept the folder. My mother set her water glass down. When I called to tell you Crispin and I were engaged, you said he seems like a decent man and changed the subject to Marco. I thought maybe I had timed the call badly. I kept the folder. I kept my voice the same across all three of those sentences. Level. Unhurried. The same register I used in client calls when I was explaining a contract clause that someone had not read carefully enough. And last Thursday, I said, at 11:47 p.m., the night before my wedding, you sent me a text that said your brother's trip matters more than your little party. I paused. Not a call. A text. 11:47 at night. I let the silence hold for a moment. While you were in Buenos Aires for Marco's trip, I confirmed 214 guests. I finalized the catering timeline. I arranged my grandmother's car service. I walked down the aisle on Rodrigo's arm because you were not there. And my wedding was not a little party. I touched the edge of the anniversary contract without picking it up. I have been running the logistics of this family's important moments for 7 years. The anniversary dinner you thanked the restaurant manager for. The insurance claim your colleague heard you say you handled yourself. The internist mom told her sister she found through her own research. The apartment Marco told his friends I helped him find. My mother's hand was flat on the table. She was not looking at the documents anymore. She was looking at me. I kept every piece of paper, I said, because I am a person who keeps records. I was not keeping them for this conversation. But here we are. I squared the stack gently. I do not need a proper reception with Gerald Fitch's wife. I had my wedding. It was exactly what I wanted. What I would like, going forward, is for this family to understand what I have actually been doing for the last 7 years. I closed the folder. My father did not speak for a long moment. When he did, his voice was quieter than I had heard it in a long time. You should have said something, he said. I looked at him. I said it every time I did it, I said. You were not listening. I picked up the folder and I set it back in my bag. I stayed for the rest of the dinner. I did not leave early and I did not raise my voice and I did not slam anything. I finished my meal. We talked about small things. My mother cried briefly near the end, quietly, in the way of a woman who has understood something and is not yet sure what to do with it. My father drove home without saying much. I know this because Rodrigo called me the next day. He had spoken to my mother. He said my father had been very quiet on the drive. Marco found out through Renata, who had heard it from my mother. He called me 2 days later, uncertain, and said I didn't know you co-signed my apartment. I told him I knew he didn't know. He was quiet for a while. Then he said he was sorry. I told him we would talk about it properly when he was back. I meant it. Renata sent me a text that said, "You kept records." Of course you kept records. Followed by a single emoji that I will not describe because you will either understand it or you won't. I have thought about that dinner a lot in the months since. Not with bitterness, I want to be precise about that. Bitterness requires you to keep reopening the same wound, and I had already done that work over 7 years of carrying a folder I told myself I did not intend to use. What I felt after was something more like the particular quiet that follows a decision that has been waiting to be made for a long time. The thing about being the capable one is that capability gets mistaken for self-sufficiency, and self-sufficiency gets mistaken for not needing anything. I had made that mistake too about myself. I had told myself that keeping records was just how I was made, that doing the work without acknowledgement was fine because the work was its own reward. And some of it was. But some of it was also a way of staying small enough to avoid the conversation I was afraid to have. What I learned, and I do not mean this as advice, I mean it as a thing that happened to be true for me, is that the document is not the point. The folder was not the point. The point was that I finally said out loud what had been true for a long time, in a room where the people who needed to hear it had nowhere else to look. My father and I talk more carefully now. Not warmly, not yet, that is a longer project. But carefully, which is a start. He asked me last month, in a way that felt like it cost him something, whether I had enjoyed the wedding. I told him yes. I told him it was exactly what I had wanted. He said, I should have been there. I said, yes. And then I let it sit, the way you let a thing sit when it is true and there is nothing useful to add to it. If you have ever done the work without the credit, kept the record without the plan, shown up without being asked, I hope something in this story landed somewhere useful. Share it with someone who would understand it. That is the best thing you can do with a story like this. This is a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes. All characters, events, and details are entirely fictional, and any resemblance to real persons or situations is coincidental.